let's start talking about business process management systems. A business process management system, it is a system that will support the design, analysis, and the execution, and not only that, but also the monitoring of a business process based on, on the basis of explicit process models. And we sort of did that a bit last week when we did the simulation. Now, Signavio isn't particularly a proper business process management system, but of course we got a model in Signavio. We got it to an executable state. Remember, we checked the syntax and we checked whether it was actually simulatable. Once we did that, then we linked in the BIMP and we filled out a lot of information in the forms as to who the resources were doing the activities, the type of arrival mechanisms, were they geometric, fixed, random, that sort of thing. We put in percentages, likelihoods of following one path or the other. And then what we did is we simulated. So the two together, Signavio and BIMP working in tandem, not strictly a business process management systems, but certainly performed similar types of functions. All right, so a BPMS, business process management systems, they originate from older types of process-aware information systems, and they're called workflow management systems. Okay, so workflow management systems are older types of process-aware information systems. And this is where business process management systems originate from. If anyone is used to working with SAP, SAP has an excellent workflow management system built into it. So you put in diagrams. Now, SAP, remember the EPC type diagrams you did at the very beginning? Okay. With SAP, you build up a workflow management system by building up an EPC diagram. And then you assign roles and responsibilities to various elements in the EPC diagram, and then it will automatically build that in and create an automated workflow management system for you. So SAP is excellent at this. And SAP, as I said, at the moment, well, as of a couple of years ago, it was still using EPC diagrams to build up its models, but it is making that transition to BPMN 2.0. Okay, so BPM, Business Process Management Systems, they're focused on the modeling and the execution of the business process, which is what we did last week in the simulation. We modeled it with Signavio, and then we executed it, well, sort of, we simulated the execution in BIMP. So we didn't wholly execute it, we simulated the execution. So workflow management systems. So they focused on modeling and execution, didn't very well support other phases of the BPM lifecycle. So the purpose of a business process management system is to coordinate all the activities in an automated business process, such that all the work gets done at the right time and it gets done by the right resource. So in a BPMS, you might have a number of resources. So for instance, last week we had clerks and we had credit officers. We assign the role of a credit officer to do a specific activity. Then the purpose of the BPMS would be to coordinate that to make sure things get done at the right time by the right resource. Okay, now there's several different ways that we can use to classify business process management systems. And we can look at this table here. So we've got classifications down the left-hand side, and they can further be grouped into what we call data-driven or process-driven. Okay, so they can be classified as unstructured. They can be classified as ad hoc structured, implicitly structured, or explicitly structured. And then further, you can see how it moves across into either data-driven or process-driven. And in the case of case management systems, it tends to cross both of those boundaries. Whereas you can see groupware systems are mainly data-driven, but unstructured, whereas production workflow systems and ad hoc workflow systems tend to be more process-driven. So let's have a quick look at, a closer look at some of these elements in the spectrum. Okay, so let's look at groupware systems first. Now, groupware systems, as it says down here, they're data-driven and they're unstructured. And so groupware systems. So when you're a user in a groupware system, what you're enabled to do is to be able to share documents and information directly communicate with other users. And the best known of the groupware systems is IBM Notes. Has anyone used IBM Notes? Let me, I've got a grid here with people. Anyone use IBM Notes? If you could do a hand up or something. Don't forget, groupware systems, unstructured, data-driven. Then we'll look at ad hoc workflow systems, ad hoc structured. Okay, so IBM Notes, okay, groupware systems popular for their high operational flexibility, and traditionally, they don't directly support business processes in a strict sense. They don't support it, but they facilitate it. So if you've used IBM Notes or what's Microsoft OneNote, that type of thing. Okay, so if anyone's used Microsoft OneNote, don't directly support the business processes, but they do facilitate it. So there's a lot of commercial groupware systems, so IBM Notes, Microsoft OneNote, and so on. Let's have a look at ad hoc workflow systems. Ad hoc workflow systems, what they do is they allow on-the-fly process definitions, and that can be created and modified. Okay, so it's possible to adapt a process during the execution of it. And this normally, this isn't allowed. So normally you would define your process first, and then you would put it out there for execution. Normally, once a process is executing, you can't modify it. So they allow the adaptation of a process during execution. So on a technical level, what these systems do, they provide private process definition for each case, recognizing that each case could be different. There's two major requirements to success for ad hoc workflow systems. End users have to be aware of the process in which they operate, and users have to have sophisticated tools and capability to be able to do that modeling and even change during execution. Case management systems. Okay, if you remember, that was as we're going from the bottom to the top. The case management system was the next one. It spanned the two categories of data-driven and process-driven. Okay, so it also can be considered an adaptive case management system. Okay, so it supports processes that aren't tightly or completely specified. It's fully aware of data which belongs to a particular case. It's able to inform end users about status and history and steps to continue. And let's look at production workflow systems. So production workflow systems, these are the most prominent types of business process management systems. Okay, and these are process-driven. They're not data-driven, they're process-driven. So the work is routed strictly on the basis of a process model. So you have a process model, much like a BPMN diagram or an EPC diagram, and as work is performed in an activity, then it's strictly routed to the next activity based on that underlying process model. So it's not an ad hoc type system, strictly routed. So if you have an activity that's performed by a certain resource, and you might have a pool of resources, then when something is finished from the previous activity, it's automatically routed to one of the next available resource. So if you're a credit officer, there's a pool of 3 credit officers. The next task is to be done by a credit officer. Then the work would be routed to the next available credit officer. So it's all done strictly on the basis of that underlying process model. Operational data is typically handled by complementary database management systems. So these production workflow systems would work in conjunction. They would have an underlying database management systems which would hold the operational data. And as work is routed from one activity to the next, then access to that data would also be routed along with it. Okay, so you with these production workflow systems, you're not allowed to deviate from the process logic. There's 2 types. There's administrative BPMSs. So they're used in settings where work is performed by people. And there's transaction processing BPMSs, and they support processes that are automated.
The Victorian Institute of Technology has other great videos covering many different topics. Please check them out, and thanks for watching. Remember to like and subscribe the video for more great content like this.